Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to our expert session, I Came from the Future, Your Job Doesn't Exist There, brought to you by our friends at PromptQL. I'm Jenna Holland, Director of Digital and Marketing at Data Science Connect, the world's largest data and AI ecosystem for enterprise leaders. Today, we're excited to welcome hundreds of attendees from around the world to explore what the future of work looks like and what it means for your career, your organization, and the skills you'll need to thrive. For years, organizations have been invested in dashboards, semantic layers, and increasingly complex analytic stacks designed to help people find answers in data. But as AI systems gain the ability to reason over business context, generate analysis, and answer questions directly, the role of traditional BI is undergoing a fundamental shift. In this session with Adam Malone, Director of the AI Catalyst team at PromptQL, we'll explore what happens when AI becomes the primary interface for enterprise data. Rather than spending time writing SQL, creating reports, or maintaining layers of abstraction, analysts are increasingly focused on teaching AI how the business works and turning that knowledge into a scalable organizational asset. Adam will lead us into what the future of analytics looks like, how to avoid investing in architectures that are already becoming obsolete, and what skills data professionals need to remain indispensable in an AI native world. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To make this feel a little bit more in person, we suggest you add a profile to your photo and include your bio, LinkedIn profile, and other information you want your fellow attendees to see. Next, please take advantage of the Q&A and chat features in the right sidebar. We'll be addressing your questions throughout the webinar, so be sure to upvote the questions you would like Adam to address. If you're wondering where your organization stands compared to others on your AI journey, check out the poll question in the right sidebar. And finally, to learn more about how to prepare for the future of AI and work, check out the call to action from PromptQL throughout the webinar. Now, without further ado, here is Adam to kick things off.
Thank you so much, Jenna. So I came from the future, and your job doesn't exist there. That's a whole talk. Thanks for coming. Okay, no, all right. Before you spiral, I'm going to kind of just throw it open to people in the chat. And before we jump in, I'd love for you guys to give me an understanding of which future you think I came from, because there are a few. There's some good futures and there are some terrible futures. So first one I've got is the Back to the Future, 88 miles an hour in a DeLorean. Who is from this future and who thinks I'm from this future? Leave it a couple seconds. Great, we love that. Another future I've got for you is the Terminator future. Anyone's coming from the Terminator Skynet future? Any doomers in the chat? I'm imagining a lot of hands up here. Awesome, great, no Skynet futures. Okay, we've got the weirdo future now, the which pill do I take future? It's the Matrix future. Is this real or is this all just happening in our heads? Anyone from that future? And the final future, the Wall-E, we all sit in these kind of couch potato pods and just get machines to do everything for us. Anyone coming from that future? It's okay if you're honest. This is the most honest future. We all want to be living in a little bio pod thing. So back to me. My future, the one that I came from, is the Back to the Future future. It's the optimistic timeline. You can see that I'm from this future because that's me in that future. And so we can change things in order to get to that future. My job here isn't to scare anyone. Well, maybe like a little bit at first, but I think once you start to understand the future that I'm from, you'll start to see that it's not scary, it's just different. It's weird, it's different, but ultimately it's not scary. And quite frankly, now is the right time to be thinking about this. So a little bit about us as a company. We went full AI native in March this year. And a little bit of context about me and my journey in this. I run forward deployed engineering. We're a team called the AI Catalyst team. So our role in going full native is to really adopt AI inherently, make it the one thing that we do, the one place that we go, and then share that knowledge and enable our customers to do exactly the same thing. And going full AI native is very different to how a lot of companies are kind of thinking about AI, as we'll talk about in a couple of slides. And so it's less about what kind of AI bots do I have in my Slack, and more about fundamentally changing the way that we work to be AI first. And this is kind of the growth that we had over the past few months in terms of, all of the different things that we did in AI. And so AI is using a lot of messages, a lot of what we call the wiki, a lot of different artifacts in order to kind of drive our own internal growth. To frame how I kind of think about AI, I really like bringing up this framework here. So this is Anne Murako's framework on AI adoption levels, 0 to 5. And I think it would be awesome if you could just kind of mentally configure where your business is and kind of where you are as an individual in where the framework says AI adoption kind of shows. I'll walk you through in a little bit of detail. So level 0, it's kind of show AI. It's, the CEO demonstrates something at an all hands, everyone claps, nothing changes. It's kind of AI theater. It's like the TSA. It's like, okay, we've done some AI stuff, but our work hasn't fundamentally changed. When we start thinking about level 1, this is around like personal productivity. As individuals within an organization, I'm doing something with AI by myself. I'm working with the AI and it's making me a bit faster. Maybe I'm creating a dashboard. Maybe I'm working on to-dos. Maybe I've got something that scans my email and alerts me to when, a high priority action comes in. It could even be working with Claude or Codex or ChatGPT work or Claude Co-work and kind of, using these platforms to do a thing. The problem, though, with personal productivity is that when a person leaves the organization, the knowledge that is captured between the person and their tool also disappears. So yes, you're building something, but you're not actually building any organizational knowledge. You're just vibing with a tool. As we step further down this, team workflows, that's kind of one level up on this. And it's now, a team maybe has a particular stack that they work with. Maybe they share a Claude MD for processes. Maybe they've got a repository of skills that they pull from. Sales has a stack, engineering has a stack, data has a stack. And they're kind of AI islands or AI islands that exist within the organization and don't have that cohesive view that when you're trying to do work, you really, really kind of need. As we step a little bit further in this, level 3 is organizational infrastructure. Now, this is where things start to get interesting. I think we crossed this threshold maybe 9 months ago. This is where non-engineers are starting to ship production level workflows. I'll show you a couple of those in our demo later. We're also starting to see roles in the org chart that didn't exist a couple of years ago because people are now providing their context to the AI and doing things that would normally fit into kind of a defined role in the past. Where we are as PromptQL is level 4, which is kind of AI native operations. AI is the primary interface for work. We have a shared context that compounds automatically, which means that work I do impacts positively other people around the organization without them having to be a part of it or without them even having to find my knowledge. At level 5, which, this is kind of the back to the future, is entirely self-driving. So we're not there yet, probably for the best, but that's kind of, where I think a lot of organizations are kind of looking to go to have entirely self-driving and humans as context providers. So while we think about this, I'd love to get a little bit of a feel, if anyone is bold enough to put into the chat where in those levels they think their organization is. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people were kind of hovering around 1, maybe starting to think about 2. But that's kind of the honest truth in things, right? Like AI does promise a lot, but until you start to capture the context, until it becomes this almost self-fulfilling loop, you don't quite get out of the world of like, I'm working with my AI and it's my memory and the AI itself, which is amazing. You get execution for free, but it's not quite there yet. And I'm seeing in chat, this is kind of exactly what I expected. Yeah, exactly right. So stepping through into this, I'd love to kind of demonstrate a little bit around what AI pilled looks like. And you might have heard this if you've kind of been online in the past couple of years. To be AI pilled is to kind of truly take on AI from ground zero and from that kind of full native format. When you're AI pilled, AI does become that primary interface. It is the first place that you go in order to do your work. And so in order to transition into a fully AI native organization, you kind of have to believe in what AI can do. So let's show you how we tackled a few of these challenges that a couple of our customers had, and took them from being level 0, level 1, into being more AI pilled and more AI native. I'll walk you through a little bit of this. As an FDE and as part of the FDE team, I live inside some of the world's largest enterprises. It's ironically where I'm sitting today. I'm sitting in an office in a corner of a Fortune 100 company as we go into kind of our second stage of production with them. Luckily, I've got my background on, so no one will know where I am. So my first example here, this is a Fortune 500 company. They're a security company. They were kind of 18 months in to an implementation. They built this enormous, natural language to SQL solution. They had a big cloud warehouse. They were using frontier models and kind of they took an approach of like a classic ontology / knowledge graph approach. They spent 18 months getting to 70% done. And the hardest part of it was going from 70% to 71% because, once you've kind of documented your APIs that you call from, and you've documented the databases that you get data from, the thing that always changes and the thing that is kind of never documented anywhere is the knowledge that lives inside people's heads. Additionally, when they tried to kind of combine information from multiple sources, when they're trying kind of multi-table joins and trying to get the AI to work on how to do that, the accuracy itself collapsed. AI is great at answering simple questions on simple tables, but when you start to kind of combine lots of different join orders and guessing which key in this database compared to that key in that database, which might fall under an entirely different team, how to join those things, it just doesn't work. And so when we worked with them, the execs that sponsor it, they can't admit that it won't work because it's a sunk cost. They've developed this entire ecosystem internally. They keep investing instead of pivoting. And it's like Achilles running from the arrow. They're always 18 months away from being able to release because that work effort for that 30% is intractable. You can't define how to get knowledge from people's heads into a system that will allow AI to use it. Another example I've got before they joined us was it's a Fortune 100 tech company. They bolted AI onto their chat tool. So, very familiar story. They spent about 12 months building an AI layer on top of their messaging platform. They used some custom integrations, middleware orchestrations, permissions, all of this kind of thing. And then what they realized is that a chat tool isn't a context layer, it's a fire hose. So every message that came through that channel for 5 years with no structure, no disambiguation, no way of really understanding a definition for revenue on this chat versus revenue on that chat, it just didn't work. Now with PromptQL, they're rebuilding with shared context at the center instead of communication at the center. And so getting rid of the middleware actually allowed them to automate their context switching. Another company here, another organization we work with, it's a global FSI. They decided to build their semantic layer first. And it was a glorious semantic layer. It was amazing. Like I saw it, I looked at it, I worked with the team who built it and curated it like a garden. It was one source of truth with governed metrics and certified definitions that came from over here and legal had signed off on. The challenge is that when they went live with it, it was immediately out of date. And again, any work effort done to pull any new information in had to go through a whole big process that would ultimately take more time to bring into the semantic layer than their platform was moving. Today, there's a couple of people who maintain it. Everyone's a bit afraid to touch it. Everyone kind of rants around it because the business has just moved faster than that semantic layer ever could. It's a DBT project, by the way. I'm sure some of you have kind of explored or played with that a little bit. And then the fourth I've got here is an e-commerce company, the kind of mid-market. Before they came to us, they built a text-to-SQL Copilot, which was amazing on a demo. It answered clean questions with clean data. Everyone loved it. When they rolled it out, though, the first question was from the CFO, and it was, what's our margin by category? Turns out that margin actually pulls from 3 different tables, depending on whether you want gross margin or net margin or contribution margin, which is a special margin that is defined within one of their teams. And no one wrote those things down, and it wasn't documented anywhere. People they just know it in their head. So the system choked. And it's the pattern that we see everywhere. When things are curated for a demo, for example, they miss the context of the messiness that goes on inside any organization. Organizations are just, by definition, incredibly messy areas because different parts of them grow at different paces, and different knowledge is curated in each of those different places in different ways. So before we jump on any further, I've got a couple of different stats for you here. Because these are not just anecdotes. UC Berkeley published a benchmark on this, I think about 6 months ago. It's real world data questions. I think there was something like 50 different queries across 12 different data sets, 9 different domains, trying to mirror what exists within a normal organization. The absolute best frontier model, which I think at the time was, I think Opus 4.6 or maybe 4.5, only was able to maintain about 38% accuracy when you say, hey, here's a lot of this data. And when we're dealing with companies who have, Sarbanes-Oxley requirements, you can't do 38% accuracy. You have to do 100% accuracy. Otherwise, someone's going to get trotted out and arrested in front of news cameras. So the best AI that money can buy, 38%. The thing that everyone misses is that 80% of the failures, they came from bad planning or bad implementation. It wasn't that AI picked the wrong data source, it just didn't understand the business context. And that business context is really important. So the example that we talked about earlier on around like gross revenue, net revenue, contribution revenue, it's really important to understand the context that questions are being asked. It's also really important to understand, the business that people are being asked as well. You can't just throw a model inside a business and expect it to work well, just in the same way that you can't expect a new employee, however smart they are, to join a business and be productive from day one. They have to kind of learn the ropes, so to speak. So Berkeley found 4 things that make real world questions really difficult. One was multi-database integration, because data never just lives in one canonical database. As hard as organizations try to kind of consolidate into Snowflake or Redshift, there's always an Excel spreadsheet that exists over there, or some database that someone works with over there. 2 was ill-formatted join keys. Your customer ID never matches across different systems. There's always a prefix over here. It's kind of a follow-on from that first problem. Number 3 is unstructured text, because it's always going to be contract terms in a notes field or something, or something's documented in an email. And 4th is domain knowledge. And again, that's kind of like what that revenue means to the CFO is different to what revenue means to sales. And text to SQL, it doesn't solve any of these things. The benchmark, as we see here, shows about a 7% point gain just from shared content architecture. It's not having a better model. It's like the architecture itself. If you provide that context, if you provide shared context, then the model itself gets better within the context that you give it. It's not more intelligent. It just has more real world knowledge. So here's where I kind of flip the script a little bit. The doom is real. Query writing, data wrangling. Can you rerun last month's report? AI does that now. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. You can usually use AI, as we probably all do. Everyone here in the level 1, level 2 organizations, we're all using AI as part of our job. Whether it's using it on something like Asana or Monday, summarize me my latest things. In Jira, provide close all my tickets, whether it's in code where we're doing work, or even if it's just kind of summarizing emails and writing emails. Everyone's kind of doing this already. But when we start going wider away from like individuals into teams and entire organizations, this is something that AI can't do right now. It doesn't know when particular columns are deprecated in databases, because everyone just kind of hears through the grapevine that happens. It doesn't know that revenue means different things to different people unless you tell it that. And if you tell it that, then it will forget for the next person. It also doesn't know that, different customer tables were duplicated because there was an acquisition that brought in a new team, and you had to kind of run a parallel book for things since 2019. All of these things is kind of organizational tribal knowledge that is the context that AI lacks today. It's the thing that kind of makes us useful when we've been in an organization for an extended period of time. There's always one person who knows the information, or they know the person to go to for that information. There's always those glue people who exist. So that 7 points that Berkeley mentioned, those 7 percentage points, like that's our job today. Like we are capturing that information, we're providing that information to our colleagues, and we're providing that as context to the one-on-one AI that we're using at the moment. So the last job that survives, where I think all of our jobs are tending to, and kind of how the jobs will be different in the future, is that it's not about providing, a function. It's about providing context, working with a customer and saying, hey, like this thing has changed inside this customer. We should know this. We should now provide this to the AI. So that's what happens when the organization gets smarter, because you feed context into an AI that everyone uses. So I think enough slides. I'm going to run into a bit of a demo now and kind of show you how we use PromptQL. And I think this will give you a little bit of an understanding of our process when we run through this. And as always, please throw comments and other things in the chat as you see fit. So first thing I'm going to show is kind of similar to something that I talked about there, right? So this is a company we work with, and it's like, hey, some organizational changes, right? Someone's moving on. This is not something that is ever going to be stored in a database, but it's something that's really useful. So we now know that a person is leaving and they're being replaced by another person. And what you'll notice is that PromptQL tags in the right people. It tags in me, who kind of owns this account. It tags in some of the other people in the organization. And we're able to teach PromptQL that these changes are happening, which means that if anyone else comes in future and wants to know any more about this, the system just has this already. And it's this learning loop of throwing it out into the AI and throwing it out into our colleagues, and then the AI saying, hey, like this is really important, let me learn this, is kind of how we've approached everything, whether it's small changes like this, or even if it's things like, we're doing some actual kind of work where we're working with code or working with different problems. Everything is fundamentally the same, because at the end of the day, if we are providing knowledge about something, then we can allow the system to kind of take over execution and bring in the right knowledge from wherever it needs. So another example of this, we can see here, this is an engineering problem. One of my teammates said, hey, there's a Z-index problem. And, as you can probably guess, Z-index is like, if you work with any websites, it's like this tab is above that tab and it should be behind it. It's just kind of where things three-dimensionally exist on the page. And what PromptQL is able to do is it's able to pull in the knowledge that it has, that other people have provided to it from outside outside kind of these threads and in other processes, almost like one globally curated Claude MD that exists not just for coding tasks, but every task. And it's able to then fix these issues for anyone without anyone having kind of owning that Claude MD. Pulls things in from kind of a wiki, so to speak. So in this, we can see that PromptQL's understood the context, it's delegated to a coding agent, and then it's provided some guidance to the next person to sort of say, hey, these are the people who can review this, let's tag them in, here's that PR, and then that person tests it and merges it. So very different from a normal approach where, you might be working on development tasks in your isolated environment, and then you're not providing any of that context to other people who need to review it. Everything's kind of just happening in one place. And again, that's the difference between using AI, sideloading AI and using AI versus working within the AI itself. And then I think the final thing that I want to show as part of this demo is just how non-technical people are able to provide production level assets using the context and using the AI itself. Because again, this is something that we're looking to try and delegate out to all members of the team. And so I'll kind of run through an example here where, this is one of the non-technical members of the team in our marketing function. And, they've done a little bit of work. They've replicated a project in Claude. They're kind of looking at evaluating sponsorships and kind of trying to build their own framework but trying to do it in a way that would benefit other members of the organization. Because again, if we're working solo with Claude or Codex or whatever, then other people aren't benefiting from that context and other people can't replicate the work. So as we can see, there's a bunch of different, parameters that we've got in here. All of this is really good context. We want to look at this target audience. We want to research these people from over here. We want to kind of classify the events based on these parameters that we've got. And again, what PromptQL will do is it will understand this context in the wider context of the business and the context that other people have already taught it. And again, it will then say, hey, I think I need to learn based on what you've just told me. Because again, this is where we share that context with other people, which means if someone else wants to evaluate trade shows and trade show sponsorships, they'll benefit from all of this. And we can go back and forth and we can talk to PromptQL and we can bring in other people. Obviously, a lot of different conversation here. But if I scroll down a little bit, what we can see is we can now pull in other people to help us to run through these evaluations. And the artifacts that get created, whether they're in the platform or whether they're then sent out to other places within the organization, then allow us to really determine how we should rank these as a marketing team for the kind of job that they need to solve. Which in this case is this event worth the sponsorship that we are applying for it. And so this is really kind of how PromptQL works and how we've changed to be fully AI native. When I'm working in a platform that is ultimately AI through and through, it is always learning, it's always looking at kind of how things should work, and it's always going to be making recommendations around, I think I need to learn this. The artifact from this, kind of what is being stored, is ultimately the wiki. And the wiki is the thing that is so fundamental to how PromptQL is learning and how PromptQL context is being stored. So what we'll see here is this is kind of how the wiki gets resolved. And this is how that knowledge that we're providing as context providers gets pulled into the wiki. I'm going to just zoom out into what our organization looks like, because I think what this will show you is that every organization has this thing. And when it has this thing, it's something that no one has ever written down. It's something that no one has ever discussed before. And so give it a second to load. This is kind of what is missing within every organization that is making or preventing people from kind of truly using AI to its whole. It's the knowledge layer. It's all of the context that exists outside databases and kind of in either corners of the organization or inside people's heads. So when I look at this, what I think, because I've worked with this a lot, is that the knowledge that I have as a person within the organization, the customers that I work with, is kind of, this stuff here over to the left-hand side. No one knows all of the information within the organization. Everyone knows like little bits of it. Marketing will know a bit over here, sales will know a bit over here. But if we start to zoom in, what we'll see is that each of these resolves to kind of a fundamental part of knowledge within the organization itself. And you'll start to kind of draw parallels with the organizations that you work in and the knowledge that you have in your part of the world. You might know a lot about engineering and your CI and your testing frameworks, but not really about how sales sells the product. Or you might know a lot about the customers because you're working customer side, but not really about like how we balance our books and how people get paid. You might know a lot about how you do your forecasting and how you predict to the board the numbers that you'll get to and the regression analysis around how you do that, but you won't know anything about how the product is made because that's ultimately not your job. When we look at what PromptQL is pulling in, you'll notice that it's pulling in little bits of information from all over the organization because everyone has provided a little bit of their own context. And so acting as context providers is, in my view, what the one job will be in future. We're going to be providing context to AI throughout the course of the day while we do our job, while we work with customers, while we design new processes, while we, see new laws that are passed and how they would apply to our business, that context is wildly valuable. And that context is wildly differentiated as well. So you can see here, this is the support email that our customers use. This is one of my colleagues. They've got an email triage builder. This one here, Vishnu, as we can see down at the bottom, he's an engineer internally. Whereas Kerry over here, Kerry actually works for one of our customers. They're a senior director of AI. We can also see customers. We can also see parts of the product. Everything is very different. And if you mirror this to how you work as an organization, there'll be things that that are in your head. There may even be things that are in your head that are in nobody else's head. And that's what PromptQL does. It looks at the context as everyone's using it, and it finds a way to build it in a way that other people can then use. It's not taking jobs, it's providing context that other people are able to provide in order to make everyone's IQ go up a little bit and make everyone aware of all of the things that other people are doing. So now that I've given you a little bit of a crash course on what PromptQL does and how we use it, I'm going to head back into my deck. And I'm going to kind of run through a couple of likely questions here and things that I think you should kind of take from the topic itself. I think that the companies that will win won't be the ones with the best models. And I think it's pretty obvious that, models will always continue to get better, maybe asymptotically, but models will always kind of get better. So it's not a question of intelligence. If it were a question of intelligence, then you'd be able to throw a model at a problem inside a business and it would be able to work it out. But it's not that. It's the companies that will win will be the ones that I think are able to capture and share context within them most effectively. If you put too many guardrails in place around that context, or if you create many different isolated agents that do many different tasks but don't talk to each other or have a shared context, then I think that's not a successful move, and those organizations will stay in that kind of level 1, level 2 space. The other thing I think, as I mentioned before, like the jobs themselves, as much as the economy or market seem to think, aren't going away. It's changing. And honestly, I think it's changing to a more exciting part. As a reformed engineer, one of the things I hated doing was writing documentation or writing up specifications of things. Even sometimes doing code work, it's not fun, right? It's very procedural and boring. Even filling in like RFPs, very procedural. You just spend 3 days filling in documentation. The things I like doing are working directly with customers. I like understanding the organizational pain that they have. I like negotiating how they can change their technical architecture to a different process, or even working with them to predict like how they can do modeling in future. None of these are specific to AI. These are all human to human pieces of work. And so I think the human work will continue. The human work is going to be the thing that's most important. And then where you feed the AI context. And if you feed the AI context around like your process or how the customer works, and then it becomes a multiplier for everyone rather than a kind of a single tool that people use in an isolated fashion. So they're kind of a couple of the thoughts I had. I would love to take some Q&A. If anyone has any Q&A for this. You can also ask me what my favorite movie was out of those 4. Okay, see a couple of questions that have just come in. There was one that was 20 minutes ago. So what's the point in humans if entirely self-driving? Are us humans basically envisioned as semi-active investors of time and resources if even around? I don't think so. I think wherever AI goes, we are all ultimately human, right? So even if you take the most catastrophic view in future of, AI is the thing that does everything for you. I think humans like to work with other humans, even if it's just for trust and accountability. Ultimately, like, no organization is gonna sign a contract with an AI that can't be held accountable, either in a court of law or other places. So I think that the self-driving part comes from the execution of tasks, and humans themselves are going to become more context providers for that execution, for the gaps that the AI has no visibility into. Another question that came in a minute ago, it's not graph RAG. We take an approach of tokenizing, so kind of running through the process. There's a lot of different kind of moving parts. So when natural language queries come in, it doesn't it doesn't kind of create embeddings of the text and then match to a database using VectorDB or anything. I think we did toy with that idea a couple of years ago, but it wasn't really scalable and it wasn't really real time. Because if you vectorize everything, then any new piece of data or knowledge that comes in has to then has to go into like a vectorization queue, and if you change anything, then you have to re-vectorize everything. So it took a lot of time and a lot of kind of back and forth. So we tokenize queries that come in. The tokenization then maps to specific parts of the wiki to load that part of the wiki deterministically, and then the wiki governs how the LLM will respond. So if you kind of think about this in almost like how a subject matter expert would work, the question itself or the statement or the command will be tokenized into an expert that has precisely the context that is required to answer the question or to service the demand. And then that expert is an LLM with select context in. It's also how you mitigate any issues with context window lengths or otherwise, because if you start getting an organization's worth of context in a query, then you immediately run into context window issues and lost in the middle and other things. So you're kind of selectively pulling in context as you go, but it's just tokenized, not using kind of traditional RAG and vector embeddings. Yeah, I love this question here. So another one is around open weight LLMs. Do you see more enterprises adopting either a local or private LLM or a hybrid approach with frontier models? 100%. Yeah, 100%. We roll out all different models, like it's basically bring your own model. And I've taken the approach of using the right model for the job that I need to have done. So I think the default that we change our default every now and again, and customers sometimes change their default. We tried GLM for a bit, wasn't very good. We tried Grok for a bit, it was fine. Our default model now is Kimi K3, but that's perfectly serviceable for like simple questions. Hey, go and book a meeting with me and find out, put in an agenda based on the email that I got. But when we're doing deeper work, for example, if I'm doing some deeper thought around how I might create a center of excellence with a customer, or if we're doing code work, then we're more likely to choose from like a Soul or a Fable, or if I'm doing kind of simple categorization, I might pick up a Luna or something like that. And I think with what I've kind of seen in the industry is that there was a period of time, probably from about January this year to about June, maybe May, where a lot of organizations went through kind of, you might have heard of it, token maxing. Everyone was like, spend the crap out of the amount of tokens that you've got, use AI as much as possible, and we'll figure it out later because the AI is intelligent enough to do the thing. And so I think it got to a point of almost irresponsibility where you're using like Opus 4.8 or even Fable to do very simple tasks when a simpler model would do just fine for obviously a fraction of the cost. And so where our platform has evolved to is to kind of use the right model for the job. And I'm seeing that a lot more with customers where the approach before of we will just use one model for everything is now starting to move into either, hey, we want to like self-host our own models and do our own kind of, quote unquote, local inference, or we want to use open weight models because they're just, orders of magnitude cheaper. and then using the right model for the task. But again, going back to kind of the deck and what we saw, context is really important. So when you provide the model, whatever it is with the context, it needs to have the right context. And any model kind of, I'd say most open weight models now are of a reasonable standard that they'll be able to do most things. I mean, even in my kind of personal work and things, I'll use non-frontier models from, using open weight providers because, I'm trying to be responsible at the tokens I use. Okay, let's answer this question here. So can I talk a little bit more about guardrails and how aware too much guardrails holds a business back from being effective? Good question. And I think at its heart, it is the difference between knowledge and data. Data is something that should be under lock and key. How much a person gets paid every month, people's emails, obviously, health data. Like, this is stuff that shouldn't be available necessarily to the model to use. And, you should provide guardrails around data access. On the other side, there's knowledge, right? And knowledge, like organizational knowledge, is going to be really important to kind of understand how to access the data itself. And I think keeping data really secure and putting whatever controls on the data itself, whether it's like RLS, row-level security, or policy-based access control, like all of these are valuable ways and kind of solve problems to allow access to data. Knowledge itself, though, in general, knowledge is not a thing that you need to keep under lock and key. Like the definition of revenue differing between different environments, I say generally that should be open. There are some instances, I'd say, where you want to keep some knowledge under lock and key. For example, maybe you're working on an acquisition and the specific terms of that acquisition. And I think that's where you provide scopes to that wiki that just say only these people can access this, which means, by transitive property, only the agent can access this. And I think if we wind back a lot into kind of what the heart of that question is, it's what permissions do we give the agent? Do we give the agent the permissions to go and access these data sources and trust that it will only do things based on its instructions, its system instructions, its context? Same for knowledge. My answer to that is no, you don't trust the agent to do that. You generally don't give the agent any permissions. Permissions should be inherited and granted from the user to do the thing that it needs to do. And that could be to access the wiki pages that the human can access, or to access the resources that the human could access, whether it's like a data resource or an API resource. And so I think some solutions that I've seen, you give the agent a bunch of API keys and you say, this is the agent, this is its identity, these are the things that it can access. And I think outside a very kind of simplistic Hermes or OpenClaw implementation where it's like, I give you these because these are mine and I give you them and we're one thing, that breaks down as soon as you go into kind of a multi-user system, because you don't want the agent to have your credentials when another person is using it. And so I think guardrails in terms of like data and knowledge boundary should be inherited from the user at runtime for the purposes of doing the task or retrieving the knowledge. We could also talk about like AI guardrails around like, teach me how to homebrew alcohol or something. I think ultimately that is or like, hack this system. That's something which is kind of within the space of the model providers. And I think generally they will be as open as they can without risk of litigation. I'd say that's kind of how, but we don't really concern ourselves with AI guardrails, because generally for the purposes of like businesses, people aren't creating moonshine. It's more about, how they query business information. All right, I'll pause for a second in case there are any other questions. Otherwise, I'll move to final thoughts. So final thing I'll show is that for me, PromptQL is not just for businesses. It's also for families, for people. Ultimately, when I work with my family or my partner, it is shared context, right? Like even organizing vacations or kind of thinking about how I do my investments. All of these are things that I can offload into AI itself. So yes, if you've got a business and you want to try it there, of course, but also think about using it personally as well. What I found is that by taking context that's in my head and structuring it and providing it to the AI, it can then help me almost like a thought partner to undertake any task I want, whether it's things in my email or finances or otherwise. So here's a link up on the QR code. Feel free to try it today. And if anyone's on this webinar and wants some extra credits, we can look at that as well as a way to assist. I think you get a bunch of free credits when you join. Otherwise, thank you ever so much for attending. Love some of the questions, really deep questions, and would love to help people go from level 1, 2 into being AI native and AI pilled. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. Great insights and demo from Adam. If you missed any of the webinar or want to rewatch anything, the recording will be available a few minutes after the webinar if you refresh this page, and it will be posted on our YouTube page tomorrow as well. Thank you again to our PromptQL. We will see you all next time.